I was definitely a bit of a convert to crowdfunding. When I first saw it, first thought in my head was, that shit ain't gonna work. I set myself out to prove that crowdfunding wasn't gonna work because I saw people raising $40,000. That was a lot back in 2010. And I was like, nah, this is a myth. Money comes like that, no way. From the audience, absurd. So I set up a campaign, did some research. There was very little research at the time. So I ultimately just took the meager research that I did have, and then I just made a campaign that I thought I would contribute to. And it was for my I guess it's my 8th short film, Cerise. And I set a goal of $5,000, and I raised $6,300. I raised the $5,000 in 2 months of hardcore, like, promoting and putting it, doing things for the campaign. But by the end, I raised an extra $1,300 without doing anything because people had taken notice of it. And that, coupled with the fact that I did get a bunch of contributions from people that I never met, big contributions, $500, $1,000, I could not for the life of me figure out why these strangers were giving me money. And then it dawned on me after the second day, it ain't about the money. These are people that wanted to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They wanted to be a part of a community. That's what crowdfunding is. And when you look at the word, it's in the words staring us right in the face. The crowd always comes before the funding. Who should crowdfund and who shouldn't? That's an interesting question because I personally believe that everybody should crowdfund. At least once. Everybody should do it. But there are, the honest to God truth, there are people who probably shouldn't, and there are plenty of people who are ready to do it right now. And it's not necessarily to say that you shouldn't or a person shouldn't crowdfund. You need to be ready. What does ready mean? You look at the people who should crowdfund right now. They've done the research. They have a project that is good, not just a project, a film that their mom and dad and family members and close friends think are good and say you should do that, but a project that has been vetted by their audience. The fact that they have an audience is another reason why you might be ready to crowdfund if you've been building up your personal audience or your audience for that film in particular already. I'm talking 2 weeks to 6 months in advance of a campaign. You should crowdfund. Folks who shouldn't, let's be honest, it's the people that aren't doing the research. It's mostly the hobbyists, the ones that just want to make a film versus I want to be a filmmaker, right? The person who wants to make a film is going to say, I want to make this film and I need $100,000 to do it right. But they've never made a film before. Doesn't mean they shouldn't crowdfund. Crowdfund a $2,000 short. Start there because $2,000 is going to be hard, especially if you haven't done the full research. So it's a kind of mix of, have you done the research? And with that research, you will learn that you should have an audience built in already, or it doesn't have to be 1 million people, obviously. It could be 200 people that really want to see your film when you get it made. And if you do that, you are kind of ready to start crowdfunding right now. If you haven't done that, it's time to start doing that. Get it rolling. Because again, as I said before, yes, everybody can crowdfund and everybody should, but the work starts months before you even think of crowdfunding. I'll give a perfect example. Me. This is how I became a convert and was like, crowdfunding will never work, and then all of a sudden I'm like a preacher man about crowdfunding, is because I did the work for 6 months before I ever heard the word crowdfunding. The thing was, I didn't know I was doing the work because I was just on Facebook, on Twitter, I was going to events, and I was enjoying myself. I was genuinely having a good time meeting new filmmakers and talking about movies that we both liked. And I did all that for 6 months. And then I found out about crowdfunding and I said, I'm going to make sure crowdfunding doesn't work because I wanted to disprove it. And I spent 3 more months researching and setting up my campaign, not for failure, for success. And success from people that, honestly, wasn't my friends and my family 100% giving me the early money and giving me the early attention that I wanted. It was people that I had been talking with at these events, on Facebook, on Twitter, simply because I put in the work. I work as Indiegogo's head campaign strategist for film and creative campaigns, which basically means I'm the guy behind the scenes that talk with a lot of these filmmakers and tell them what to do, what not to do, give them advice, and make them more successful than they could be without someone like me on their team. I've worked with $5,000 campaigners and I've worked with $5 million campaigners. And I'm going to break it down in 3 quick tiers of what it takes. When you look at a movie like Con Man, or it's a web series actually, Con Man with Alan Tudyk and Nathan Fillion, it is a big campaign. They set their goal relatively low and they made well over $2 million. How did they do that? Number one, they had amazing incentives, perks, rewards. They were giving to their audience. Before that, they had an audience. These guys made a name for themselves with Firefly, cult following. Yes, they're going to be able to raise some big money. They also, on top of that, had a campaign management agency working with me and with them to make their campaign successful. And they were running the campaign together. So when we're talking about raising funds for a mid-range, let's say a feature, right? You need to raise like $20,000 to $50,000 to make it. One of my favorite examples is Simon Cox's Kaleidoscope Man. Check it out. Check out the campaign, check out the campaigns, because this is also a great example of consecutive crowdfunding and consecutive, more important, building of an audience. Because he started out raising, small amounts of funds. He's done about 7 or 8 campaigns now, and now he's, altogether he's raised over 40,000 pounds to make this one feature that is like a science fiction epic at the level of like Star Wars. And he's done amazing perks. And again, the perks aren't necessarily always what it's about, but the cooler your incentives are, the more people are gonna dive into it. This guy was giving away, perks where you put your face on this pod in the film. I mean, yeah, that's awesome. That's the kind of perks you need. And he didn't just recycle those in each campaign. He was working with me, on most of those campaigns, and we brainstormed a little bit, and he came up with some amazing other perks for each one. Because every time you run a campaign, it's got to be better than the last, period. Now, at the lower end, when you're trying to raise, money for a short film that's going to be about $5,000, or even up to a feature that's like $10,000 to $12,000, 20 million people. That's the movie I want you to look up, because 20 million people wanted to raise $10,000, and they ended up raising $13,000, and they made a film that ultimately went on to screen at over 24 film festivals, and a few years later lands distribution, and you can now watch it on iTunes and all the main platforms out there. And again, one of my favorite things about the campaign, besides the people in it and the kind of nature of the film, which is about how hard it is to find your one significant other in a city full of 20 million people, is the one perk that Michael Farrell, he's the director, he was offering at $25 and up, which was he would write you your choose your own adventure style romantic comedy. Now, he wrote over 60 of these from what I understand, and I got one because I was like, $25, I get my own personal story, I'm in. No brainer. I didn't even have to think twice about it. And back then I was still working as a professor, so I wasn't making decent money. $25 was a lot, and I didn't think about it. I went in and I was pleasantly surprised with how amazing this short story was, how much I got. I was in the actual story. That was me being a character in it, choosing my destiny, just like all the people in his film. He connected it to the film. You want to crowdfund. You need $10,000 for that short student thesis that you're doing, right? You need $50,000 to make your first feature. Man, you might even need $100,000 to cover production, post-production, and marketing and distribution funds and all that stuff. Crowdfunding is the way to go, but do yourself a favor, do the research. The research is easy. Go online, Google Trigonis, crowdfunding film. You will find a dozen articles at least that I've written for you to be able to crowdfund properly. If you want to get even deeper, you can pick up a copy of my book, Crowdfunding for Filmmakers, 2nd edition, and read that, and then spend the next 3 months after you finish the last page of my book and work at building your audience, work at constructing that campaign work at doing everything you need to do to be able to raise whatever amount of funding that you need to bring your film to life.